As most of you in the industry are aware, your Texas Association of Realtors has produced a full library of new forms to use in implementing the new compensation practices required under the NAR settlement. In this podcast, I will only be able to address a few crucial ones and explain their purpose. The association will be publishing an FAQ to address all the form changes and common questions, so be on the lookout for those. The first form I want to address that you need to be aware of is an addendum to the contract titled Addendum Regarding Broker's Fees. The purpose of this form is to negotiate as part of the sales contract the seller to pay buyer's agent's commission. This will be used as an addendum to the contract, and then you will not have to use special provisions to create the obligation of the seller to pay the buyer commission. If, on the other hand, the buyer is just going to pay their buyer's agent commission, then this form will not be necessary. The second form I want to present to you is the Amendment to Representation Agreement. This form will need to be executed as an amendment to any listing agreement or buyer representation agreement currently in effect and which were written on the old forms. The amendment complies with the requirements of the NAR settlement by bolding the disclosure that all broker compensation is negotiable and sharing of compensation is not set by law or otherwise fixed. It also deletes paragraph 8B of the old form listing agreement, which addresses cooperation with other brokers and makes distinction between MLS participants and non-MLS brokers. Finally, in boldface type, it amends the buyer rep agreement to prohibit the buyer broker from receiving compensation for their services from any source that exceeds the amounts negotiated in the buyer rep agreement. The third form I want to address is titled Residential Buyer/Tenant Representation Agreement, short form. This is a form that can be used similar to what I call or think about as the one-time showing agreement. Because the NAR settlement requires a buyer rep agreement prior to showing the buyer any home, it may be helpful to have a limited or short form agreement to start off the relationship. The only question I received on this form is where to address any transaction fees that the broker may require. There is no provision on this form for other compensation. There is a provision for that in the long form. I think this provision may be something that will be included in the next version of the short form. The fourth form I want to address is the compensation agreement between brokers. Since MLS can no longer publish the amount of commissions a cooperating broker will be paid by the listing broker, and therefore cannot serve as the enforceable agreement between brokers, if buyer's agent's commissions will be paid by the listing broker, then an executed compensation agreement will be necessary to create the binding contract. If the seller, on the other hand, is paying the buyer directly as part of the contract negotiation, this compensation agreement is not necessary. Of course, the association has also published a new buyer representation form, the long form, and a new exclusive right to sell listing agreement, which complies with the requirements of the NAR settlement. I suggest you familiarize yourself with these forms as well as the other library of forms and be prepared to implement the new procedures as soon as possible. The deadline for compliance is fast approaching. When all is said and done, I think we will find the new processes, procedures, and forms are not that difficult to implement. But if you have any questions or need further information on these forms and processes, please reach out to Allegiance Title at tipoftheweek@allegiancetitle.com. Thank you.